At its peak, this was the biggest toy store on Earth, with more than 1,500 stores worldwide. 1 out of every 5 toys sold in America went through its doors. And then, in the span of a single week in 2018, 2 things happened. Liquidation signs went up in 735 American stores, and the 94-year-old man who built the whole thing died. So here's the question. How does a company that sold 1 in 5 toys in the country, a company that dominant, end up worth less than the debt stapled to its own name? Picture the last days. The shelves are half empty, and there are yellow signs in every window reading, "Everything must go." Jeffrey the giraffe, the mascot a whole generation grew up with, is coming down off the wall. There was no press conference to explain it, and no obvious villain to point at. The store that had outlived nearly all of its competitors simply stopped. And to understand why, you have to stop looking at the toys. Start looking at the balance sheet. There's one financial move you need to understand first. It's called a leveraged buyout. Here's how it works. An investment firm wants to buy a company, but instead of paying with their own money, they borrow most of the price. And here's the trick. They put that debt on the company they're buying, not on themselves. So think of it like buying a house, except the mortgage goes in the house's name, and the house has to pay it off out of its own paycheck every month. If it can't, you don't lose anything. The house does. If it works, the buyers strip out fees, fix the place up, sell it on, and walk away rich. And if it doesn't, the company is the one left holding the debt, not them. Keep that in mind, because in 2005, this happened to Toys R Us. In 2005, 3 firms, the private equity giants KKR and Bain Capital and the real estate company Vornado, bought Toys R Us for $6.6 billion. They put in about $1.3 billion of their own money. The rest, more than $5.3 billion, was borrowed. Roughly 80% of the purchase funded by debt, and that debt didn't sit with KKR or Bain. It sat with the toy store. Now do the math on what that costs. Servicing that debt ran the company about $400 million a year, every year, in interest alone. And to put that number in perspective, Toys R Us was now spending more each year paying down its debt than it spent on its actual stores and its website combined. Sit with that for a second, because the one thing a retailer needs to survive the arrival of the internet is money. Money to modernize, to build real stores, to build a real online business, and every dollar that could have gone there was already promised to a lender before it ever arrived. Meanwhile, the owners were getting paid the whole way through. Over the years they held it, KKR, Bain, and Vornado collected roughly $470 million in fees and interest. One organizer for the workers put it more plainly. She called it a business that turned into an ATM machine for Wall Street. So you'd assume the business itself was already dying, that the debt was just finishing off a corpse. It wasn't, not entirely. Its sales had been softening for years, and its core earnings had roughly halved after 2012. The decline was real, but this was still one of the largest toy sellers on the planet, still generating billions in revenue. This was not a dead company. It was a profitable enough company that could no longer afford to fix itself, and to keep the whole thing standing, it had to keep refinancing, borrowing new money just to pay off the old. That works, right up until it doesn't. By 2017, the bill came due for real. About $400 million of debt matured that year, and $2.6 billion more the year after that. So the company went looking to refinance, same as always, but this time, the lenders flinched. A wave of retail bankruptcies had spooked the market, and nobody wanted to hand Toys R Us another $1 billion. And then, in early September, the news leaked that the company had quietly hired bankruptcy advisors. That leak did the killing. Suppliers panicked. They stopped shipping toys, terrified they'd never get paid, right before the holidays, when the company makes roughly 40% of its entire year's sales. It was a run on the store, and it forced Toys R Us to file for bankruptcy in September of 2017, before it even had a plan for how to survive it. Now here's where everyone points at the obvious suspect, Amazon. The internet killed the toy store. It's a clean, simple story, except it isn't true, not the way you think, because Toys R Us actually took Amazon to court and won. What it couldn't beat was its own balance sheet. Its bankruptcy loan came with holiday sales targets. The holidays came in weak, the targets were missed, and a rescue turned into a funeral overnight. Up to 33,000 people lost their jobs, nearly all with no severance. 1 week later, its 94-year-old founder died. Because this was never a freak accident. It was a formula. Buy a healthy company with borrowed money, charge it fees, and let the debt do the dying. The owners were paid years before the lights went out. Today the name survives. A logo inside a Macy's, everything under it is gone. Because Toys R Us wasn't killed by the internet, or Amazon, or kids who stopped playing with toys. It was bought, borrowed against, and billed, until there was nothing left to bill.